Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheilla, and our story today is called Angel to the Rescue. Well, this story happened in 1964 up in Alaska. It was one of those kind of sleepy days. Matter of fact, it had been snowing for 2 whole days, and it just finally quit. Well, Dad, seeing that the snow had quit, he was a senator in Alaska, and he told Mom, he said, I need to go to Fairbanks for business. Now that the snow stopped, I better get going. So Mother, whose name was Tay, and Ann, who was 8, and her brother David, who was 6, all went to the door to wave goodbye to Daddy. After they had done that, they'd went in the house to do some stuff, and Ann said, I don't feel good. My head hurts. Mama said, I'm sorry. Here, let's all of us go upstairs, and we can just rest. We can lay on the beds, and maybe we can watch a little bit of TV. So that was agreed that that's what they do. They went upstairs, and they all took off their shoes because they didn't want to get dirt on the beds. Mom helped Ann lay down and gave her a couple pillows to lean against to see if maybe her headache would go away. While they were laying there and watching that TV, all of a sudden, Mama heard some big rumbling sounds. Well, not too far from them was a military base, and oftentimes Mother would hear the sounds of the soldiers practicing shooting their guns. But then she thought about it, and this rumbling did not sound like guns. Well, Mother, she was sitting there on the edge of the bed thinking about this when all of a sudden the house started going back and forth and back and forth and up and down and over. And Mom said, earthquake, earthquake, get out of the house. So Mom and Ann and David rushed downstairs. Well, Mom had just stuck her feet in her shoes, and Ann had done the same. But when they got outside, David went, I'm barefooted. And they were standing in the snow. But Mother turned around, and the door to the house was still open. And the hall that they had just ran through split in two. Then they looked next to them, and the garage was moving back and forth and back and forth. And as they watched, it just crumbled into a pile of rubble. Then a big tree that had been in their yard went tumbling down the cliff. Well, their house had stood up on top of a cliff. It was a ways from the edge of the cliff. But their house, they heard glass, they heard boards and wood cracking, and as they were standing there, their house just went tumbling, what was left of it. Now Mother, she was standing there with the 2 kids. Where should they go? And then that rumbling and rocking and rolling started again in the ground, and they were standing on part of the ground that used to be behind their house. As they were standing there and the earth was making that terrible noise, right beside them, the earth cracked open, and the crack kept going down, 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 down. They couldn't even see the bottom of it. And as they stood there, it was getting wider. And Mother went, "Anne!" Anne was on this side of that big crack hole in the ground. And Mom and David were on the other side. Well, she couldn't leave her daughter over there. She knew that that hole was going to continue to get bigger. She got really close to that edge. It was scary because, as I said, when you look down in that crevasse, she couldn't even see the bottom. It was so deep. The earth had just cracked open. Well, Mother knew it was going to get bigger. So she got really close and she stuck her arm out as far as she could and she said, "Anne, take my hand." So Anne did. And with all her might, Mother pulled, and she pulled Anne back on that side, the other side of the crevasse. Oh, she was so glad she had got her with them. Well, then Mother looked the other way. You know, like I said, their house had been built way up here at the top of a rocky cliff, but far back. And down below that cliff and all the land there was an inlet of water from the ocean. And it had like a beach, and there were cliffs that went up. Well, they were up on top where those cliffs were. And suddenly, Mama said, well, to the person that she had told the story to, that it felt like they were going backwards on a Ferris wheel. The ground was going down, up, up, and down. And they were riding on it. There was no place for them to go. One minute they knew that they were up high and they were looking around. The next minute, the cliff part in front of them fell down. And then the earth started falling and the rocks started falling. And they were going on this up and down thing. And Mother looked down there and she saw the water and she thought, oh, she knew that if all this cliff and all this sand and rock fell into that inlet, that water would come up and there they would be. Well, finally, Mother and the kids were on a whole pile of rubble at the bottom of a new cliff, a cliff that hadn't been there before, and it went higher and higher and higher. And Mother, she went, "Oh, Jesus, help us. I thought you were going to be with us to the end." And I think that Mother thought that this was the end of all time. Well, that earth kept shaking and going up and down, and dirt and rocks kept falling. And Mother said, "Help us, Jesus. Please." And all of a sudden, in Mama's heart, she felt a peace. And she looked around at the kids and she said, "Jesus isn't up there in the sky. He's right here beside us." Well, then they were standing there looking up to the top of that really high cliff. And Mother saw a man at the edge, and she started calling, "Help! Help us! Help us!" And the man yelled down. He said, "Stay right where you are. I'll go try to find a rope." So the man disappeared, and they waited. Pretty soon, not one man, but 6 men, 5, 6 men, stood along that edge up there. And one of the men came forward, and he was a man that Mama didn't know. She'd never seen him before. He was a stranger. And with those other 5 men up at the top of the cliff, holding on to that rope, they had ran it around something, maybe the bottom of a tree that was still secure, or a huge boulder or something, and they were holding with all their might. And that man came riding down that rope all the way down the side of that big cliff. When he got to the bottom, he saw that there they were standing in the snow. Little David had no shoes on, and Anne looked like she was shaking from the cold, or maybe she was shaking from fright, because that earthquake was still going on, and the ground they stood on was still moving. Well, there was no time to waste. The man, he took off his coat, and it was a black wool coat, and he put it around Anne's shoulders. Then he scooped up David, and he got a hold of the rope, and they rode that rope up the hill. Down he came again, and he got Anne, and he took her up on the rope. And then Mama and the man got a hold of the rope, and those people very carefully pulled them to the top. Have you ever seen people go on a rope up a cliff? They stick their legs out in front of them so they have their feet flat against the cliff, and they hold on to the rope, and as the rope swings, they push with their feet, and as they're going up, they can get there. Well, when they got to the top, they were exhausted, and Mama turned around to thank that man for what he had done for them. But he wasn't there. He wasn't there at all. The other 5 men were there, but the 6th man was just gone. As Mother was thinking about that, she looked to the bottom of the cliff, and there, right at the edge of the water, lay the roof from their house. "Well, Mother," she said, "he had to have been an angel. Our rescuer had to be an angel." But they had no way of proving it. But don't you think that that's what an angel would have done? Is rescue a mommy and her 2 kids in distress? Do you suppose that the coat that Anne still had on had belonged to an angel? Well, someday, when Mommy and Anne and David and Daddy get to heaven, I bet that Mama will see that angel there and go, "You were our rescuer. You helped us, and God sent you to answer to our prayers." Our angels are wonderful, boys and girls, and they're there whenever you need help. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.